Hello and welcome to Pastor's Library. My name is Stephen Redman and this is the channel where we talk about all things to do with theology books. May they be books that are on a reading list for a seminary course, for a bachelor's or master's degree in theology, or whether or not they're just books that you've seen on the shelf of your pastor or vicar and want to know more. Well, this is where we try to scratch that itch. And if you like what we say today, please click like on YouTube, and also remember to subscribe and to ring the bell, and that way you'll know next time we release a new episode of Pastor's Library. So last time we talked about the Old Testament Pseudepigrapha, and today we're going to talk about the New Testament. And really, again, some of you may say, well, why? Because these aren't Bible, they aren't canonical, they aren't books that we recognise in the church as having a spiritual value. They aren't books that we believe are inspired, and all of that is true. But they are books that were written maybe within 150 years or so of our Bibles, and they give us a little bit of insight to what was going on in the world. And indeed, some of the early church leaders had read them and commented on them. Now, there is an old version of a book called the Apocryphal New Testament, which was translated by Montague Rhodes James, which a friend of mine gave me recently. And it's an excellent book. It gives you his translations of original documents, and from time to time there are little dots where part of it can't be read, but he does give his best translation. And I would suggest to you today it's quite hard to get your hand on one of these. But what you can quite easily put your hand on is J.K. Elliott's update to James's original. This provides a more updated translation, more in keeping with the wording we use today. I think James was something like 1925 off the top of my head, and this one is much more like the early 90s. A lot of things have happened in that time. We have, of course, got much better and older copies of documents, or some of them anyway, and it gives us an opportunity to give perhaps a more acceptable translation. So in general, J.K. Elliott is the one that I would suggest. It's also reasonably affordable. And it tells you in the front exactly what you can expect to find. Please do remember that very few of these documents are complete, in the sense that perhaps only a page is extant, or even a paragraph. And those are there translated with the best ability of the people who've undertaken the task. So in here, in Eliot, you'll find, for example, the Gospel of Peter. Now, in recent years, I have heard on the BBC News, breakthrough, lost gospel revealed. This is going to revolutionise people's understanding of Jesus. And they've done this, I think, on 3 occasions that I can remember, with the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And one has to ask yourself, would the BBC publish out today, expected to sell 500,000 copies, is the new translation of the Bible? No, but if there's something sort of vaguely controversial, they will do it. And what you have to remember with all of these documents is they were not adopted by the early church, and they were not adopted for good reason. The vast majority of them have their roots in Gnosticism, which is that way of thinking that the physical body is always bad, it's evil, it's corrupt, and the spirit is pure and godly. And the Gnostics, for example, that believed in Jesus, believed that he didn't have a body, that he was a spirit only, because he couldn't be good otherwise. And people that wrote things like this, of course, wrote scriptures that would back up their viewpoint. And so you'll read some wacky doctrines in these Gospels. You'll find, for example, a totally different attitude to women in them that you would see in the Gospel of Luke, for example. The Gospel of Luke, which is a book which is very even-handed between the sexes, one which talks an awful lot about women, and very positively too. And that is a book which is so different to the Gnostic Gospels, who really didn't see women as anything to write home about. It's really good, if you look at these, that it will help you with people who say, ah, yeah, but you are the church has covered up the Gospel of Mary Magdalene for centuries, yet you knew all about it. You know, you can turn around and say, well, yeah, I've read it. But it's not that we covered it up, it's that we wanted people to understand that it wasn't written about Jesus. It was written a fictional account. It was written to promote the particular doctrines of a cult, which of course is a fairly accurate statement today. And it's amazing how many people that you talk to will shut up instantly when you can say, oh yeah, I've read that, yeah, it doesn't have anything to offer. And really that's quite an important thing to most people, because most people will expect to have wrong-footed you by asking you these questions. And in these days in which pastors are often being considered with the phrase pastor theologian again, we're looking in another day in which pastors are expected to have a little bit of theological training. It's actually quite helpful that we read these things so that we can be authoritative in what we say. What I'm saying to you is you shouldn't really be quoting, well, Steve Redman says. What you really ought to be saying is, well, I've read it and that's what I think. So I leave that with you. So Eliot is an excellent book to have on your bookshelf. It will really empower you. You will read about the Acts of Peter, the Gospel of Gamaliel, the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew, the Proto-Evangelism of James. They're all in here, and so are many others. Whilst we're on this subject, I just want to mention one other book, which I think really I probably prefer of the three. And it's James Robinson, who's the general editor of the Nag Hammadi Library. So this is basically the library of documents from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this are not older Old Testament Pseudepigrapha. These are New Testament ones, documents that are written post the Apostolic era. Most of them we think 150 to 250 AD, that type of thing, but some of them quite a lot later. And this translation not only has most of what Eliot has, but it also has the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which Eliot doesn't have that. And the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is one definitely that I would advise pastors to read, because it's absolutely ludicrous. It gives a totally different Jesus to the other Gospels, and of course there is this secret that is on there, because the Gnostics were big into secret knowledge. Agnostic is a person who doesn't know, a person who's ignorant. A Gnostic is a person that knows something that you don't, something secret. And the Gnostics wrote about such things. And so I would suggest to you James M. Robinson is also a good book to have. Now, personally, I found Robinson and Eliot helpful to have on my library shelf until a friend gave me the original Montague James version. I'm not saying that Montague James is a good investment, but if you find one cheap on a bookshelf in a second-hand bookshop, then obviously it's a steal. But the updated Eliot version, I would suggest, is probably better, and James M. Robinson, because it offers a slightly different mix of documents. So I think that's the main things that I want to say to you. What we really need to be as pastor theologians is we need to be people who can speak authoritatively about matters that rise up in our media. And certainly the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gnostic scriptures have become quite big from time to time. And to be able to say, oh yeah, I've read those, nothing interesting here. And where there is something interesting, it might be to help us understand the Gnostic mindset and to understand why they wrote what they did. Even though it's not necessarily true, it does have some insight for us into the sort of things that were perpetuated at the time. You know, there's no reason for us to question that the story went round after the resurrection that the disciples had stolen Jesus's body and amazingly overcome an armed Roman guard, which in itself is a bit preposterous. But we know that because the scriptures tell us that. Scriptures are very open about that. And the New Testament is itself full of documents that are remarkably open. You might say they tell us things that we have no right to know. But the Gnostic Gospels is very much sort of a bit cloak and dagger. I know a secret you don't know, that type of idea. And certainly the characters, particularly Jesus, are very different characters to what our New Testament offers. So I suggest that you have a look. Please don't replace your Bible readings in church with the Gospel of Thomas, but you know, it is still an ancient Near Eastern document. And in saying that, it has some relevance to our studies. And I just offer that to you now for your consideration. I hope that helps you. If it does, remember to click like, remember to subscribe, and remember to ring the bell. That way you'll know the next time we publish an episode of Pastor's Library. God bless you. Bye.